Texas, from Cuba, convicted, homicide, arson, weapon offense.
Convicted. So what we talking about? Convict Texas, some of these perpetrators that rape these women that are sitting behind you that you refuse to even acknowledge they are here.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a few seconds back to make up for the yelling? Thank you. General, did you have anything further to say?
Texas, convicted of homicide, Cecil Joseph from Dominican Republic. Texas, convicted for kidnapping, rape, Khalid Khan from Afghanistan. That's why they want to talk about Epstein and not what's happening in their own states.
She just got asked about Epstein, about FBI files, about survivors sitting in that very room. And her answer was to read a list of immigrant criminals from Texas. That is what just happened. That is the Attorney General of the United States on the record in front of Congress. And the reason that moment is everywhere right now is because it wasn't a slip. It wasn't nerves. It was a strategy. And once you see how this hearing actually unfolded from the beginning, that pivot stops looking like deflection and starts looking like desperation. Let me show you the full picture, because what Crockett did in that room before that moment is what made the pivot so damaging.
Behind me, I have 3 documents from the DOJ production that are emblematic of the massive failure of the DOJ to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. To my right is an email that was sent by the victim's lawyers to the DOJ. It was a list of names not to redact, a list of names not to release. What did the DOJ do with this email? They released this email in the document production. Literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors, you did. And they're getting phone calls. A lot of these people didn't want to be known. And we know you touched the document because you redacted one name and you redacted the lawyer's name, but you left the survivor's name there. The next document I want to show you, that was in the title, the victim's survivors' names, all right? The title of this one is Child Sex Trafficking, Co-Conspirators, fully redacted. And by the way, I'm going to unredact them here. Les Wexner is in this. Now, your your deputy attorney general said, oh, well, he appears hundreds of times in the files, but he doesn't appear in this file until I forced you to release it, where he's listed as a co-conspirator, not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking, not to prostitution, not to money laundering, child sex trafficking. And then finally, what we have here is the third exhibit that I have is emblematic of the FD 302 release. These are the documents that we need that you're holding on to and over-redacting because they have the names of the men who are implicated. How do we know? Because the survivors gave testimony to the FBI, and it's in there. And what happens when you go to the portal at the DOJ to look at what's behind this redaction? Another redaction. So we can't even see them. And then there's some of these files you've pulled down from the website that we will never see because we can't search the redactions. So I have several questions for you. Who's responsible? Are you able to track who in your organization made this massive failure and released the victims' names? Are you able to track who it was that obscured Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in an FBI document? Do you have that kind of accountability?
I believe Wexner's name was listed more than 4,000 times.
Yeah, I already told you that. This is where he's listed as a co-conspirator.
Can I finish my answer? Come on, let me finish my answer. We corrected that within 40 minutes. He was already, you're acting like everybody's trying to cover up Wexner's name.
Reclaiming my time.
I'm going to answer this question.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Chairman.
This is how this works.
Can I have my time back?
Mr. Chairman. The gentlelady can give her answer. The time belongs to the gentleman from Kentucky.
All right, I'm reclaiming my time.
Can I give my answer?
So yes. I'm going to put the language of the bill up on the screen.
Chairman, may I give my answer on that? It's a political joke, and I need to give my answer on that.
We'll let the Attorney General respond, and then the gentleman can move to the next question.
It's my time.
Within 40 minutes, you asked me a question.
You can give
Within
me-
40 minutes, Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed.
There was one redaction out
Where
of
he's
over
listed as a
4,700,
co-conspirator.
and we invited you
Show
in.
the video.
This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs
Show
to
the
get, you're a failed
He won.
politician.
Gentlemen,
You need to
time
get
I
on
want you to
things
watch
that
the
matter.
video.
Mr. Chairman, please restore his time and remind the witness of the rules
There
here.
is
Time.
no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals.
Is that your position as well?
My position is any victim who comes forward, of course, we would love to hear from them. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I'm reclaiming my time. I'm glad you're asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't-
bigger than
when you can't-
Watergate.
when I don't answer a question the
This
way you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's
now,
where the
I want to
most
know at what point did the FBI and the DOJ?
That was a Republican. That was Thomas Massie, the co-author of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the man who wrote the law that was supposed to force these documents into public view, telling the Attorney General to her face that she is responsible for a cover-up bigger than Watergate. And Bondi's response was not a legal defense. It was not a factual rebuttal. It was, "You have Trump derangement syndrome, and you're a failed politician." That exchange alone tells you where this hearing was headed before Crockett ever got to the microphone. Because when even your own party is calling it a cover-up on the record, and your answer is a personal attack, the room has already shifted. Now watch what happens when Crockett steps in.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, I'm not going to ask any questions of this witness because this witness has revealed that she has no intentions of answering questions. But instead, I'm going to ask some very basic questions really quickly of my colleague, Becca Ballant, if she will answer right or wrong, raping children.
Wrong.
Right or wrong, killing random citizens.
Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States.
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then we also have this objection that we use as lawyers called non-responsive when a witness fails to actually answer the question. But nevertheless, let me address the survivors because that's exactly who they are. They are not victims, they are survivors. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice.
She didn't even look at Bondi when she said that. She turned her back to the Attorney General and redirected the entire 5 minutes. And the survivors sitting in that room, wearing shirts that said, "Still waiting," heard a sitting Congresswoman say out loud that they had more moral clarity in their pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. That line was not for Bondi. It was for them. And it was for anyone watching at home who has been waiting for someone in that chamber to say it plainly. Now, watch where this goes next.
We are currently the laughing stock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ, as we see kings and queens falling everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country because it's not about partisanship. And that's why I applaud Thomas Massie, because he's the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. But nevertheless, let me keep going. My Democratic colleagues have been attacked this entire committee hearing. They have been lied on. And frankly, the American people weren't looking for that. They were looking for answers about the corruption that they see coming from this administration. In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had 2 main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly, just like a grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Slotkin, just like the case against Tish James was dismissed and the case against Mr. Comey was dismissed. I completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ because you don't seem to be good at your job. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting these journalists. In fact, we know after Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were arrested, we know that there were homes of journalists that were raided. We know that threatened prosecution against students protesting your actions and forced tech companies to remove apps used to track ISIS activities.
Every case she named there had already been dismissed or rejected by a grand jury. That is not opinion. That is the public record. And the fact that Crockett was able to list them in sequence without stopping, without being cut off, without Bondi offering a single factual correction to any specific case, that is significant. Because the usual move in a moment like this is to interrupt, to object, to challenge the framing. Bondi didn't. She sat there, and Crockett kept going.
But let's circle back to you protecting pedophiles and creeps, because I want to talk about the president and his possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't know what the president might have done with Jeffrey Epstein, but unlike this administration, I believe that facts matter. So let's talk about the facts. Fact number one, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contained more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number two, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Here's another example. This shows notes from FBI investigators that describe Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, this is a good one. Now, I'm not saying that the president is a pedophile, but there is a lot of evidence in these files that suggests that he's very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. What's crazy about all of this is just that this is a big cover-up. And this administration is engaged in it. In fact, this administration is complicit. But there are numerous others, like how the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens, or how the DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections, or how federal agents have Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe and your agency killed the investigation, or how your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history. An attorney general who has prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. And Mr. Chairman, I will yield.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized. Excuse me, gentleman from Kansas, the Attorney General, former Attorney General, Mr. Schmidt is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Bondi, thanks for being here. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we talk?
I do. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, my friend, for many years. I find it interesting that she didn't even want to try, Congresswoman Crockett, to ask any questions, because she certainly did not condemn her leader, Hakeem Jeffries, for taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted. And I will be brief to give you your time, Congressman. This is what she didn't want to talk about. Texas, from Cuba, convicted, homicide, arson, weapon offense.
Convicted.
You know,
so what we
Estrada,
talking about? Convict
Texas,
some of these perpetrators
homicide.
that rape these women that are
Chairman,
sitting behind you,
time
that
belongs
you
to the
refuse
gentleman
to even
from
acknowledge
Kansas.
they are here.
Time belongs to the
Texas.
gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a few seconds
You
back
bet,
to make
you
up
bet.
for the yelling? Thank you. General,
Thank
did you have
you,
anything
Congress.
further to say?
Texas, convicted of homicide. Cecil Joseph, from Dominican Republic. Texas, convicted for kidnapping, rape. Khalid Khan, from Afghanistan. That's why They want to talk about Epstein and not what's happening in their own states.
That was the answer to 38,000 references to the president's name in FBI files, to notes from investigators describing a victim being transported to Mar-a-Lago with the words, "This is a good one," to survivors sitting in that room in matching shirts that said, "Still waiting," to a Republican congressman calling it bigger than Watergate, to every dismissed grand jury, every rejected case, every raided journalist's home. The answer was a list of immigrant criminals from Texas, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Afghanistan. And then the hearing ended. Here is what that pivot actually reveals. When you have a substantive answer, you give it. When you have evidence, you present it. When you have a legal defense, you make it. What Bondi did instead was reach for the one argument that she believed would change the subject fast enough to survive the clip. And she was right that it would generate noise. But she was wrong if she thought it would make what came before it disappear. Because Crockett's statement is already in the congressional record. The Massey exchange is already in the congressional record. The FBI notes she read from are already entered into evidence. Those things do not get walked back with a list of names at the end of a colleague's 5 minutes. There is one detail from this hearing that most people have already scrolled past. When Rep. Jayapal asked Bondi to turn around and face the survivors directly, to look at the people who were sitting just rows behind her wearing shirts that said, "Still waiting." Bondi refused. She said it was theatrics. The survivors responded publicly afterward. One of them said she had 3 opportunities to address us. All she had to do was turn around, and she could not even do that. That is the image this hearing leaves. Not the shouting, not the burn book, not the immigrant list. It is a room full of survivors with their hands raised, and an attorney general who would not turn around to face them. Drop a comment and tell me, after everything you just watched, do you think Bondi walks into that April 14th deposition with any answer she didn't have today? Or does the subject change again?